Energy.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, we're talking about the biggest headlines of the week, some of them difficult. 2 people are dead after a campus shooting Thursday at Florida State University. Federal immigration officers will begin patrolling 10 state university campuses, and students and teachers are reeling after firings and program closures at Jacksonville University. We'll talk about all that, as well as the latest news on threatened AP closures in Florida public schools and new details in the death of a jail inmate. Later on, Drive-In meets downtown at a new Pocket Park movie premiere on Main Street. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. A federal appeals court has issued the latest ruling against the Trump administration's handling of an immigrant illegally deported to El Salvador. The U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals says the Trump administration is, quote, asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process. This case has already been to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it could return if the Trump administration appeals. The Supreme Court says it will hear expedited arguments next month on the issue of birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. are American citizens. The matter has been settled law for more than a century, but NPR's Nina Totenberg says President Trump disagrees.
Trump, however, has long argued that there is no such thing as automatic citizenship, at least not for babies born in the United States if their parents were not born here. So, on his first day in office, he issued an executive order banning birthright citizenship, which was promptly challenged in court by a bunch of states.
NPR's Nina Totenberg reporting. Every year, the U.S. State Department releases human rights reports on every country around the world. NPR's Graham Smith tells us that this year there are major changes coming in these reports.
Internal State Department documents reviewed by NPR show the Trump administration is dropping multiple categories of human rights abuses from its annual country reports. No longer will the U.S. call out governments for violations against the freedom to privacy, the right to free and fair elections, or the right to peacefully assemble. More than 20 kinds of violations are being stripped out, according to these documents, to comply with recently issued executive orders from the White House. Among them, violence against minorities and disabled people and serious government corruption. Human rights defenders tell NPR they're concerned the U.S. is abandoning its post as a supporter of personal freedoms and that this will send the wrong message to authoritarian governments. Graham Smith, NPR News.
A vigil will be held today on the Florida State University campus in Tallahassee for the victims of yesterday's mass shooting. NPR's Greg Allen reports the 20-year-old suspect arrested by police is the son of a sheriff's deputy.
Police say Phoenix Eichner used his mother's handgun to shoot 8 people, killing 2. Leon County Sheriff said he'd been a member of the department's Youth Advisory Board and had gone through extensive training with the department. The shootings occurred near Florida State University's Student Union building. Students locked themselves in basements and bathrooms while they heard gunshots being fired outside. Eichner didn't surrender when confronted by police and was shot and wounded before being arrested. Classes at FSU are canceled today, as are home athletic events through the weekend. Greg Allen, NPR News.
This is NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. The Hope Florida Foundation had hoped to give clarity about Questions surrounding millions of dollars it gave to groups that may have used it for political purposes on Thursday, but online trolls had different plans. Tristan Wood has more.
The charity, championed by Florida First Lady Casey DeSantis, has been in the hot seat after allegations it diverted $10 million in a Medicaid settlement to fund Governor Ron DeSantis' political attacks against the ballot initiative for recreational marijuana last year. The charity's board hoped to institute some processes to make it more accountable during a virtual meeting, but the meeting was short-lived. During the meeting's opening public comment section, the trolls spammed pornographic videos, Nazi and fascist imagery, as well as fake AI audio imitating President Donald Trump. The meeting had to be postponed due to the onslaught.
What a spectacle that was certainly hard to watch. I promised that we were going to keep the Zoom clean.
That's Florida Democratic Party Chair Nikki Fried. After Hope Florida's meeting, she hosted her own, where she criticized what she sees as continued incompetence and corruption of Hope Florida in the DeSantis administration. DeSantis and Florida Attorney General James Uthmayer, who was the governor's chief of staff when the money changed hands, both maintain that the money allocations were legal and above board. I'm Tristan Wood.
Highs reached the low to mid-80s for most of Jacksonville today.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR produce programming that meets the highest standards of public service in journalism and cultural expression.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler. Welcome to First Coast Connect. It's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our headlines, it's been a tumultuous week for Florida's colleges. A mass shooting at FSU leaves 2 dead, 5 hospitalized, and a campus traumatized. State universities agree to allow ICE enforcement at their schools. And Jacksonville University stuns teachers and students, cutting dozens of majors and firing nearly 40 teachers. In other news, details emerge in the death of a Duval County jail inmate. Students speak out against a state plan to defund AP programs. And the First Lady's signature Hope Florida is entangled in a political scandal. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by David Bauerlein, Metro reporter at the Florida Times-Union. Good morning, David.
Good morning, everybody.
Dan Scanlan, reporter at WJCT 89.9. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
Obi Ummuna, attorney and political consultant. Good morning, Obi.
Good morning.
And Tricia Booker, author, professor of journalism at the University of North Florida. Good morning, Tricia.
Good morning. Slow news week, but I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. Appreciate that. I think we'll begin just as we must with this latest tragic event. We know 2 people have died, both of them not students, 5 others hospitalized at this incident at FSU. The shooter believed to be a current FSU student. What are we hearing, Tricia? I mean, this is, you teach at UNF. I'm sure that you're hearing from colleagues and friends and students, just how this impacts even here in Jacksonville with so many close ties to FSU and Tallahassee.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it happened in Tallahassee, but I think that we can't discount the impact that this has on all students who attend public universities in Florida. I mean, it just changes the vibe. I mean, my kids, of course, know lots of kids at FSU. They were making calls. They were hearing from friends who were hiding, and it scares them. So just because it happens someplace else doesn't mean it doesn't start occurring to them, wow, this could happen here. It hits a lot closer to home.
For teachers too, I imagine.
Yeah, for teachers too. I mean, we frequently piss people off. There are students who get upset with us, and we love our students and we want what's best for them. But you certainly start to think, okay, how am I going to react if I find that somebody is upset with me, is mad at me? How do I protect my students? How do I protect myself? It just makes us all think about our vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and Obi, the news conference that was held yesterday late afternoon, it itself was very shocking. I mean, we already knew that this incident had happened, but that was the first that we'd heard that 2 people had died. It was the first that we learned that the shooter, the alleged shooter in this case, is the daughter of a longtime veteran Leon County deputy there. And so it was a day of grief and tragedy and also just a lot of news.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, it just seems like these things are not surprising anymore, that these are consistently happening on a regular basis. Literally 2 days ago, there was a high school shooting in Texas, and we are consistently seeing these things happen. One of the most stunning things that I heard yesterday was that, there's several students that were in Parkland that are going to FSU at the same time,
Mhm.
and this is their second experience kind of going through this. And I think we all need to step back and say, is this what freedom really feels like? Is the freedom to be able to go to college and to get educated without the threat of being shot? Is this really what freedom feels like? And it doesn't feel like that. And as we were driving in, the stories of the names of the people that were killed are starting to be released, and you're starting to see the real families and the real impact that is going to happen that comes from this. And you know, in Florida, when this happened, they passed a law to raise assault rifles to be purchased by people over 21.
When
But
Parkland
yeah,
happened.
when Parkland happened, and now they're really in the legislature trying to take that back. And so we just really need to be careful about moving backwards, because we're seeing this happen so often, and nothing is surprising about what happened. It's more surprising about who the people are. But these things consistently happen.
Yeah, astonishing to think that some of those kids also experienced Parkland. And we a lot of footage yesterday. We heard kids commenting about this sort of being the new normal. Let's take a listen to what one of the students had to say yesterday.
Unfortunately, I've grown up in this era to where school shootings and campus shootings are not commonplace, but we've practiced for it, we've trained for it, we know what's going on. And in this era, news travels so quickly and rumors travel so quickly that within minutes we all kind of had an idea of what was going on upstairs.
And Dan, that was a kid who was, in the union sort of downstairs from where the shooting was happening, but, became aware of what was happening when kids started running to escape the building. So a very, devastating event for these kids and their families.
It was terrifying to hear one student interviewed who actually watched another student in scrubs get shot in the back. And there
Or
is
maybe
an
not a student, but a person.
a
I
person
think.
in scrubs, and there is an eighth victim here who was trampled, apparently, according to the Tallahassee Democrat this morning, by people fleeing. The Democrat also has a dive into Mr. Eichner that he had radical viewpoints as a high school and community college student.
Talking about the alleged shooter here.
Yes,
Phoenix Eichner.
Okay, we want to name, yes. And for example, one student said, I got into arguments with him in class over how gross the things were that he said. He had ideas, theories that Joe Biden illegally came into office, that black people were ruining his neighborhood, and he also got tossed out of a high school discussion course because of his radical ideas. And we also hear that mom is an honored 18-year veteran deputy. She was a school resource officer, and it's her ex-service weapon that he had his hands on. Stated yesterday, mom's not going to get implicated in this, but then you have to wonder, you're a cop, don't you know how to store weapons? And apparently this young man had a shotgun as well as a service weapon, and we don't know which one to use. So that's two weapons brought to school.
Yeah. Um, David, this is just a little over 10 years after another shooting at FSU, which you'll well remember at the library there in 2014. In that case, the shooter was killed. Nobody else died, but there were several kids shot, and it is obviously an era. I mean, this is a generation of kids who have grown up in this environment.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And Tricia makes a great point, which is when something like this happens, the first thought she had was, how would I react? And really, none of us really know how we would react. And that's what's so chilling about this, that college campus in particular on a sunny day in Florida is such a bucolic place. It's a place of peacefulness, serenity, and to have something like this suddenly shatter all that, it's really chilling. And it is something where it does feel like, I don't want to say it's a new normal. It shouldn't be a new normal. But, how do you respond to it? You know, it really takes away some of the innocence that you would have on a college campus for sure. And to have it happen a second time in 10 years at the same campus and the Parkland students being there this time, it really does drive that point home.
Well, it is a reminder, if nothing else, that there's a lot that law enforcement on campus has to deal with on any given day. And certainly a school threat, a shooting threat like this is top of mind. But another headline this week has to do with new patrols that we may be seeing on campus. ICE, immigration enforcement to begin patrolling 10 state university campuses. The other two apparently just in the process of getting the paperwork signed. And this is all coming after a directive from the governor. So first of all, how are people reacting to this news, Tricia? You had actually saw a protest on campus about this yesterday.
Yeah, so I spoke to my students about it yesterday. They're baffled. They're actually baffled by why this is becoming a thing. It's interesting that this news came down on the same day as the FSU shooting, because of course the ICE patrols are to protect, I guess, the campuses from undocumented people or kids on student visas who protest. That's not who students are afraid of. They're afraid of kids who have rage, regardless of color. I mean, it's instructive that the suspect in this case is white, a white man with conservative viewpoints. The protest was relatively small but very vocal and talking about how students should not have to be afraid. And there are students who are afraid. There are students who are documented but who have student visas, who now don't feel like they can speak their mind, who don't feel like they can talk about current events for fear that their points of view will be misconstrued. And it really does have a chilling effect on the ability to practice your academic freedom. My students are also concerned that the UPD is going to be trained, but that they're really not going to know what they're doing. They are trained as police officers, but how are they going to do the job of ICE? They don't quite understand how this is all going to work, and they don't understand why it's a thing.
We're talking about the week's big headlines with our panel of journalists. And if you'd like to join us, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. We've got a call from Daryl in St. Augustine. Good morning, Daryl. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Just my comment. When Dan Rather put on the 6 o'clock news what was happening to the boys in Vietnam, we ended the Vietnam War. When the New York Times put the open casket of the boy that was tortured in Mississippi, we changed the civil rights. When the media starts showing a body that's got bullet holes in it, these children, these students, these kids, then the American people will do the right thing and they will start writing gun regulations. But until, frankly, the media starts showing what it looks like to have a child have his head blown off, then, they're just going to do thoughts and prayers and let's talk about it again. So I hate to blame the media, but this is a cop-out by the media for not showing what the truth is and what the damage is to a body. If they start looking at blood, they'll change their mind.
Thanks, Daryl. I mean, what do you think about the idea that showing more violence would in some way mitigate the tendency of people towards violence?
Certainly, it's worth noting that 60 Minutes, now this isn't local, but 60 Minutes did a really in-depth investigative piece on CCOT, which is the terrorist prison in El Salvador. Lots of details, lots of gory scenery not scenery, but gory images of what's going on there. And they weren't afraid to do it, but now President Trump's administration is trying to take CBS News off the air. So I do think the media is out there doing things, but there are repercussions too.
Well, and you and I know from our former jobs as police reporters, sheriff's offices, police don't let you near the scenes anymore. You can't see what a body looks like. You can't even see a body going into the medical examiner's van. Only social media will show that. And if the TV stations or media broadcasts that, they usually, blur out the bad parts. But we can't. I have not seen a body at a crime scene in over 15 years, and I really don't want anyone else to see it. FYI, the 12 universities in Florida, as well as FHP and other state law enforcement, are signing agreements to train their officers in ICE techniques to detain, question, and jail. So it would be actually your university police, your trooper, your sheriff's deputy training, and a lot of the local police departments are ceding to their county counterparts to do that. Fernandina Beach Police Chief telling me this week that indeed he's going to let Nassau County do it. Nassau County is going to train a few deputies in this. So it's your own deputies you may even know very well who are going to be trained in how to deal with this memorandum.
I mean, in the training, though, Obi, is basically the directive is allowing the officers who are trained to stop, quote, any alien or person. And we should say that alien is a term that a lot of people disapprove of using, but that is the language of this directive. Any alien or person believed to be an alien as to his right to be or remain in the United States. So they can stop anybody on that question, and they can process for immigration violations those who have been arrested for criminal offenses. But they can also, without warrant, arrest any quote unquote alien entering or attempting to unlawfully enter the United States. So the question on campuses, I think Tricia was alluding to, is the concern that these directives might not necessarily, well, it could in some cases steer people towards identifying people on the basis of their appearance.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't force them to have probable cause before the stop, which is what is kind of the basis of what our law is based on, is that you can't just be shackled or taken away because of, that is literally what tyranny of the government stands for. And we are now allowing that in this case. It's unfortunate. I am a UNF alum. My family has a scholarship at UNF for my immigrant mom who worked really hard to get me through school. And to see that the campus has agreed to this is really upsetting. But I want to be clear, because the reason why they're agreeing to this is because, the governor and the legislature hold the budget in their hands. And any kind of comeback would mean less money to UNF, and all of the universities at this point are under stranglehold because of how effective the Governor DeSantis has been, and using the budget to punish anyone who disagrees with him.
I want to listen to what one teacher, this was a professor at FIU, which has a significant proportion of students who are here on immigrant visas or are DACA students. They're actually majority Hispanic in addition to being heavily immigrant. But this was what she had to say in an interview yesterday.
It's not just students, it's faculty, it's staff who are here on work visas, who are here legally, but they can still be approached and interrogated about their visa status. So do I have to carry my passport around all the time now because I don't look maybe American enough?
That a concern, David Bauerlein, that we've heard, as Tricia said, and also from students, but, if kids don't necessarily look, quote unquote, like they're from here, that they could be stopped.
Yeah, that's a chilling effect of it. And to me, a university or a college probably has a better idea than any institution of who the students are. I mean, it's not like a public school, where a public school in the United States constitutionally accepts everyone. They don't check papers. They don't, you come to the schools, you're a first grader, you want an education, you get it. But, for a university, I mean, there's a lot of applications, there's backgrounds, they know all this. So it feels a little bit like overkill to also have ICE agents on campuses, other than this concern people have that you can be targeted if you are here on a foreign visa and you say or do something that is politically disagreeable to authorities. So I would hope that UNF never has to use this sort of power they have. And I certainly would be troubling if UNF were to have its own police, arrest somebody or take somebody into custody because somebody wrote an op-ed piece. I don't know if that's something they can opt out of now, though. It sounds like they have to comply with this type of this movement.
Yeah, and we do know that that has been happening elsewhere, Obi. The Tufts University student who was taken into custody in a very dramatic and frightening fashion, frankly. And all the government has shown so far is that she'd written an op-ed. She's a doctoral student from Turkey, and was taken away by officers.
Yeah, I mean, it is starting to be, to use the term Gestapo on the street, right? There's people getting picked up left and right, and their due process is not being heard before these people are being picked up, and they're being held overnight. Even some U.S. citizens have been held overnight, and so we're starting to see that this process is not a fair process. It is riddled with mistakes and holes, but that is also infringing on the rights of people. And this country, kind of our biggest seller to international students, was the freedom that you have in this country. They come from countries where they don't have this freedom, where they don't have this opportunity, and the selling point to get them to stay and to be, part of our community and to contribute is, look at the freedom you have. And a lot of now we're starting to look a lot like some of those countries that they came from.
And Dan Scanlan, that will, I would think, in some ways erode the appeal of foreign students to attend college in the United States if they're seeing, targeted arrests or visas being rolled back without warning. A lot of, temporary protective status visas and others, potentially work visas, being lost without a lot of warning from this administration.
Let's think about the economic impact if X% of students are not allowed or decide not to come into school programs, number one. And number two, let's talk about the fact that if they don't show up, then programs are cut, further eroding what our universities offer. And look at Harvard right now, who's saying, no, we don't want to deal with what you're saying. And now they're facing the threat of loss of federal funds. It could be like a snowball rolling down a hill. It could really grow large and could hurt even more.
Yeah, I mean, foreign students really do pay the full freight and are a huge source of income for colleges. Tricia, that's not a small thing. If students who are coming from abroad and paying the full tuition, as opposed to most students from the United States who pay a discounted or somewhat.
They bring a lot of economic value, but they also bring a lot of cultural value to a university too, and help our students understand what life is like in other parts of the world. I also wanted to mention that just kind of the co-opting of language and words, and it seems like for many of these students, they believe that expressing any kind of sympathy for example, the Palestinians equates to being pro-Hamas or being anti-Semitic. And I think that is certainly seems to be what happened with this student from Tufts. There's no evidence that she that she was pro-Hamas, but yet expressing some kind of sympathy for the Palestinian plight was equated to Hamas and being anti-Semitic. And certainly they're not the same thing.
Yeah, well, we know that is, part of a larger, movement and effort at the federal level to sort of shape a debate about anti-Semitic behavior or content or language and target that. It's something that recently, David, a lot of Jewish groups have, come together to oppose, saying that they believe this is kind of a false equivalence, that they're being asked to say that simply because, somebody is supporting the Palestinians, that they are, anti-Semitic, and believe that that's actually ultimately going to be harmful for the Jewish community if they're seen as, the source of these repressive tactics.
Yeah, I think you can be critical of the Israel government, like you can be critical of any government in the U.S. And I think if you read papers published in Israel, there are criticisms of the Israel government. I mean, and the idea that you can't criticize actions and policies of a government for fear of being labeled anti-Semitic is chilling. And so yeah, I think there's, where is that line? Nobody seems to really understand it. I think there was the case in South Florida where a city wanted to ban the screening of a film that it's a documentary that won an Academy Award on grounds it was, quote, anti-Semitic. They ended up actually screening it, but there's, it just feels like, where is that line? And I think the best line would be if someone can write an opinion in an Israel newspaper, they probably should be able to have that same opinion here in the United States without being labeled anti-Semitic.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the week's big headlines with our panel of journalists, and we'd like to hear from you as well. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media, and you can watch our program live stream right now on Facebook or YouTube. I want to move on now to another campus topic. This is not a public school, but it shows that, private schools also not insulated from the challenges of today. This is a financial challenge Jacksonville University is facing. The school announcing it's cutting almost 40 faculty and ending its music and theater programs. Dan Scanlan, you were on campus and were there when some students were first getting notified about these cuts. What was the reaction?
Well, the rumor mill hit the night before, and then I got a source who told me that there would be an 8:45 meeting with the staff and students, the affected 100-some-odd students, and they walked in and came out crying, yelling. Their programs, they will be allowed to finish their music program, but in the fall, no new music or theater students will be allowed, and about 18 students who don't fit that are getting free scholarships from an anonymous donor to not get their Bachelor of Fine Arts, but their Bachelor of Arts degree if they choose to stay there. I tried to push Tim Koss, the president, as to the reasons behind this. Was there any loss of money or redlining, in the red that they had? And he said this was a decision 6 months in the making, that they just weren't getting a lot of kids into these programs, 1 or 2 or 3, and decided it was in the best interest to get rid of them. But in the aftermath, teachers are being fired. They have been posting on Facebook. There was apparently one last fine arts concert last night, and it was a bittersweet affair there. These students, some kept walking in with their violin cases to these meetings and coming out, dabbing their face, crying. It was just horrendous and very sad atmosphere on campus on that morning.
It's interesting that you say that the president, Koss, said, 6 months in the making, because we do know that there was a report in December about the deep financial crisis that they're experiencing. Auditors calling the future of the institution into question, saying that they failed to meet some key debt covenants for the last fiscal year. They even said at the time there's substantial doubt about the university's ability to continue as a going concern, which basically means as a viable investment. And so they're, fighting for their survival in a lot of ways here, Obi, having to make difficult choices. So this has been a process, obviously, that they've been going through, looking at what to cut, but it still came as a shock, especially for those professors who are now out of work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's disappointing. Obviously, when you're on campus, you are around a bunch of different majors, and that is kind of part of the school experience, is that you're meeting people that have different interests than you, and it's what makes a whole education. And for them to cut, really, I saw philosophy was also being cut. I saw some of these other courses being cut, and it is sad. I think obviously this is a decision that the university felt it needed to make in order to survive, right? I think I don't think you cut these programs unless you think you really have to, especially your arts and your theater program, which is a lot of times the heart of a university. I really feel bad for the students that, had made a plan and they wanted to go to this school, and now that is kind of falling away. Hopefully the university will be able to recover, that this will be all that's needed to be done. But a lot of times this is just the first cut and many cuts.
Well, this is a school that's been known for years, for decades, for being a fine arts school. The first building you see when you come in the gate is the Terry Concert Hall. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. The students I spoke to, one in particular said, look, it doesn't affect a huge number of students. It affects about 80 to 100 students in practice. But she said, everybody's upset because the devaluation of the fine arts program is upsetting. So even if you're majoring in something like STEM, you still have access to these fine arts programs and to the classes and to the courses and just to the cultural atmosphere it provides. So even though it technically only affects the graduation major of a handful, 100 students, several dozen students, there is some concern that it's going to change, as you said, the nature of the university.
Got a call from Shane in St. Augustine. Good morning, Shane. Go ahead.
Hey, how are you this morning?
Terrific. Go ahead.
First of all, I wanted to express my sadness over what's happened at the Florida State campus, and to all the victims and their families, I just wish them the best and pray for them. The main topic that concerns me, what's going on in the world today, what you have spoken on already about this, ICE presence on university campuses and withholding of funds, the threats of, I'm 64 years old. I'm white. I'm a carpenter. Well, I was, but I'm retired now. But I've never seen this much of an upheaval in the turnaround of basically our Constitution. I'm pretty sure the only examples I have would be close to the fascist movement with Hitler in Germany in the 30s, and even the communist Stalinism, that first they went after the intelligentsia, the professors and the thinkers and the doers, and the teachers. They kept the scientists, because they needed to make bombs and weapons, but it just seems it seems like some kind of strange fiction that you read about 100 years from now, but it's actually happening now.
Yeah, Shane, thank you. I mean, it really is kind of a head spinning change in certainly in some institutions and some policies that we're seeing. Certainly in the media, we're grappling with that as well. David?
Yeah, the very fast pace of change there, and it's sometimes it's not very consistent, and so that's part of the difficulty in covering it as well, in terms of how some of this immigration law in particular is being applied. And and there's also the idea, Obi talked about this, about coming to the U.S., this idea that this has been a real talent pipeline for the country, and there's a cost involved in turning that off.
What about, just to kind of return to this JU topic, we know that the faculty had a vote of no confidence yesterday in President Tim Cost. The Board of Trustees still supporting him, Tricia, but what message does that send from the faculty there at that school, and what message does that message send to the students?
Well, I think it's the faculty is basically saying to the students, we support you, and saying to the administration, well, we don't like what you're doing. And I want to point out too that just the lack of transparency and how they went about this, I think, was a big deal. Laying off faculty at this point in the year is kind of deadly. There's no way they're going to get on at a school starting in the fall. Those hirings have already been done. So it puts faculty in a really bad situation. It seems like if they've had this in the works for 6 months, I mean, I know that there's some stuff that they probably couldn't reveal, but certainly the fact that everybody was completely blindsided by this speaks to a failure to work with the JU community to do what was best for the university.
Students, too, saying that, their window of opportunity for changing schools, if they choose to, also has, essentially closed in a lot of ways.
And maybe that's purpose. I mean, maybe they don't want students leaving, and I can understand that, but it certainly is not fair.
And for what it's worth, the faculty were not allowed into the student meetings. There were 2 of them in 2 different locations. They were actually told, no, you can't. That was 8:45. At 9 o'clock, they had their meeting to learn. So actually the students learned first, and then JU officials did not really seriously discourage me from talking to any students. They said, we want them to talk to their parents first. And I noted in local media, none of those students apparently I've seen or heard from on media, at least in the first day.
Got a call from Alan on the South Side. Good morning, Alan. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, first, let me echo the previous caller. Just to add, one-party rule, bad in the Soviet Union, bad today in communist China. Okay. What I'd like to do is have the panel comment on why Jacksonville University would cut the music programs versus something that's super expensive, like, say, football or basketball. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. I mean, that is a good question in terms of, balancing the finances. The school administration has said that these programs that they cut have had, consistently low enrollment, and they're cutting them because, that's the sort of most efficient way to regain those dollars. athletic programs also bring in a lot of money, Dan.
Along with the fact that there now has that independent basketball league utilizing the Swisher Auditorium. Don't forget the school has millions and millions of dollars coming in on their new medical programs. Their law school apparently is doing well. There are lots of sponsorships out there, as Tim Koss told me, to make these programs happen as they're building their new medical campus. So that could be the future of JU, the medical and the law and the business. Well, obviously, Coggin Business Center doing fine.
To Obi's point, I mean, it does seem like this shift a little bit away from the traditional liberal arts model, cutting things like the arts philosophy and then, retaining these harder sciences, nursing, psychology, marine science, cybersecurity, business administration. David, that is a little bit different than how JU has traditionally positioned itself.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, JU is an important institution to Jacksonville and Arlington, extremely important. And it's a challenging situation, I would think, to be a liberal arts school of that size. They're not Harvard. They don't have an endowment through the roof. They're not a public university where they can really scale up in size. 4,000 students is, it's a tough niche to be in, I think, as a liberal arts school, and it is changing it, and it's kind of, on the one hand, Dan mentions, on the one hand, JU's doing a law school, it's doing a medical school, it's
expanding.
Yeah, it's expanding. It's trying to do this thing in Mayport with the marine biology and the OSearch institution. So you go, oh, this is a school that's really, in great financial shape, but it turns out that's not the case, and they have had some financial pressures. And I don't know. I mean, the idea, if you're wanting to go to liberal arts education and you're looking all over the country, the model you have is a liberal arts type school where you can go see concerts on the weekend and that kind of stuff, becoming more of an adult-driven, maybe commuter school. That would be a change as well for JU.
We've got a call from Lynn in Arlington. Good morning, Lynn. Go ahead.
Good morning. Sorry, that caught me off guard. So there are a couple things. I have a couple questions for the school and for the president. There are a lot of departments that make a lot more money than the art department. Sure, but the art department gets a lot of donations, and I want to know what's happening to the money that Fran Kenny set her legacy for and collected massive amounts of money for the school. Most of those donor agreements have stipulations on them for the art program. So, if they're getting rid of the art program, does that mean that they're then taking that money and moving it into other areas of the school? Because they got in trouble for that several years ago, because there was a scholarship that they were given, and it was supposed to be spread, and they put all of it into football. Their football program does not make money. Their football program, they are not a top league on football. Why dump so much money into football? If you want to cut some money somewhere, how about we cut money from football and some of the other programs? And the teachers at the art program, those teachers were like the lowest paid in the university. There are other places that you could have cut money. I just feel like they have taken the funds and misappropriated them over and over and over again. It's poorly managed.
Lynn, thank you.
I don't think they have a football
Yeah.
program anymore, but they do have other sports, and I think some of those sports do attract students. Not just basketball, but soccer, lacrosse, baseball, those kinds of things, which does bring in tuition for the school.
Yeah. I want to take a call from William on the South Side. Good morning, William. Go ahead.
Good morning. How's everyone doing?
Terrific.
Great. As a former educator and looking at the things that are going on in our state, and I want to get an idea from yourself and the panel, do you think that the president of JU is trying to be proactive in regards to the governor's idea about education and the woke concept? That's why he's eliminating some of these programs. Because if you look at what the governor has done in the past, taken $70 million out of the arts programs across our state and other monies that were supposed to go to support the arts and music programs. And you look at the whole idea of eliminating these programs, do you think it's just another way also of for being proactive to take away these at that university before some policies could be, put in effect
William.
against the university because they have them?
Yeah, thank you, William. I mean, JU would be somewhat more insulated from those kinds of issues and those, requirements, Tricia, as a private school. But certainly there is, a scaling back of arts and offerings at the state level outside of college campuses.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, and I think that a lot of these college presidents are in a really tough situation. Many of them are trying hard to preserve the reputation and the academics of their university, but they also feel like they have to buckle a little bit under the state requirements because they survive at the whim of the state. So I think it's a fair question, and it is part of, there has been an ongoing effort to kind of devalue the arts as a major. I mean, you remember a few years ago there was a movement to remove some majors from qualifying for Bright Futures.
Right.
It didn't pass, but certainly it's something that is always on the back burner.
I do want to move on, Dan, because you covered a story that's been in the headlines for a couple of weeks now about the death of an inmate at Duval County Jail. We know that the sheriff's office has been releasing additional information as it has, become available, or they've been able to release it. So we got some new information this week. What did you learn?
Well, we did get on was it Monday afternoon? It's been such a week. We got a heavily redacted report of the incident that occurred that caused Mr. Faggart's ultimate death at the jail. And there's some indication in there that there was some pepper spray used because he did get a saline wash on his eyes. He apparently had some seizures. That's right at the top of the police report. He was put in a restraint chair twice, but what happened in that restraint chair is heavily redacted. We also got the names of all 9 corrections officers, 1 sergeant and 8 corrections officers who have summarily been suspended as the investigation goes on. I was even commenting on Monday morning with the FBI now involved. I didn't expect to see this report. It was a major shock. And then the Fraternal Order of Police issued a statement a day or two later indicating as the police union that they felt that those corrections officers would be exonerated. And I tried to get some comment from Bilkis Plata, the family's attorney, and she said no comment at this time to that question, as well as whether or not there's going to be any legal action.
And so the report is indicating a seizure, some sort of medical episode. The family, I think, had previously said that he appeared to have been beaten. There's no evidence of that in this report, although, as you say, it is heavily redacted in terms of what happened between his periods in that restraint chair.
Well, the third line, displaying aggressive, erratic, and disruptive behavior by thrashing his body, clenching his fist, and pushing and pulling actions while attempting to be escorted into the dorm. That is what the report says Mr. Faggart was doing as officers were bringing him in. And at some points, there are 5 or 6 officers working to get him into a restraint chair. If he had seizures, there's no soft spots in a cell block. If he had seizures and was thrashing around, injuries could have occurred when he was thrashing around, or the redacted could indicate something else.
What about fentanyl? I mean, there's a mention of that in this report.
He ultimately is questioned and does admit to taking fentanyl. This is approximately 6 days into his incarceration, so that would be jailhouse fentanyl come in somehow illegally. Who knows what it could have done to him, but it does indicate that when he was taken out 2 hours later, 2 hours from the start of this by a rescue, that he was on a chest thumper. He was actually getting artificial heart compression. So by that point, to me, that says clinically dead at that point, and he was alive through a machine and ventilator, as the family says, until he was officially declared dead.
We've got just about 45 seconds, Obi, but the sheriff, in response to when the FOP president said, he believes these officers will be exonerated, sort of issued a statement of his own saying, this information that I brought forward, or the assignment of the FBI, was not a rush to judgment on these officers, or any statement about their guilt or innocence. Was he walking back the information he'd released, or the stand that he'd taken, the position?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those cases where they're going to be very careful what they say, right? I think, obviously, I would assume that the sheriff has seen the video and that he knows exactly what happened, and so there is, and what we're waiting for that to be released, I think, it's important to say this, that you should, going to jail should not be a death sentence. And so there has to be some transparency here. I'm sure he's seen that. I do think that the family and the people involved want that release so they can actually know what's going on.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Not able to get to the Hope, Florida scandal. We'll get to it another time. But thank you all so much for being here. David Bauerlein, Dan Scanlan, Tricia Booker, Obi Ummuna. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.
DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One texter call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
The Electro Lounge invites you to the Brian Gooding Planetarium at Mosh, May 30th, pairing the best sounds of the Electro Lounge with the captivating and immersive visuals of a trip through the cosmos. It's a journey that will be both intimate and expansive, scientifically rigorous yet surreal. Join us for an experience that will redefine what it means to explore the universe with music. Visit wjct.org/events for information and tickets.
On the next Florida Roundup, a cross-continent simulcast with California. The two states are dealing with troubled home insurance markets. How are they similar? How are they different? And it's not just hurricanes here and wildfires there. How has your home insurance changed? What has been the impact on your pocketbook? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then be sure to join us Friday, noon until 1.
The White House says no. Harvard says no. But signs of life discovered on a distant planet? Scientists say maybe.
This is a monumental discovery, but we also have to be extremely cautious.
Join us after another very busy week for the Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, silent films and drive-ins get a modern reboot on Main Street next weekend. Here to tell us about the cinematic event is Chef Onyx, also known as the Sweet and Savory Chef. Good morning, Chef Onyx.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. So first of all, what is happening next weekend?
Well, okay, so I decided that I wanted to do something different and step outside the box of my chef world and hop into film, Jacksonville's film history. And I wanted to bring and shine light onto Jacksonville as a film destination city, and it has always been. And paying respect to Norman Studios from the silent film era.
Oh, wow.
And so we will have a 3-screen showing, sponsored also by Hush Hush Headphones. So this will be a personalized audio experience where you'll be able to experience 3 different screens, and each screen showing something different that was filmed right here in our city.
Oh, excellent. Yes. And so these 3 screens are actually going to be set up in the Main Street Pocket Park, which is kind of like behind the backside of the main library.
Yes, right in between Duval Street and Monroe Street.
So you've got the headphones for the shows that need them, but you are showing a silent film?
No, I'm actually not showing a silent film. Nope, I am. We're going, I said I was going to announce the feature-length film, and it is Brenda Starr that released in 1992. And I
remind us of the Jacksonville link.
So the Jacksonville link, they filmed in multiple places in Jacksonville, Riverside, in Hannah Park, in Black Creek, and a few other places here in Jacksonville. But you'll learn more about that if you buy a ticket, and you will get an event booklet, and it's going to give you the entire history of Brenda Starr in that booklet.
Okay, and so some other showings we may not know or name, but they are music videos that were shot here?
Yes, so
or short films?
One of the screens is dedicated to Jacksonville local artists and their live performances and music videos. So you'll be able to see all of the amazing talent of our current musicians here in Jacksonville. And then the second screen, so the third screen is the music videos, and the second screen will be dedicated to our short film industry here. And we have a huge short film industry.
Yeah.
And currently we are sponsored by LOL Jax Film Fest.
Yep.
And so we have a lot of short films to show, some that have never been seen, and I'm super excited about that.
And so are people going to be sort of switching between what they watch?
You can do whatever you want. If you want to go to screen 1 and check out Brenda Starr for a moment, and then you see Friends at screen 3 and you want to go dance and have a good time at screen 3, you can go to screen 3 and watch the music videos. Or if you get overwhelmed by the event, I have a decompression chill zone area.
Oh, wow.
Where you can go and take photos at the photo booth. You can go check out the bar. You can go and play some games, and a whole bunch of sensory things are going to be placed out around the event, just because anxiety is really high right now. And so I want to give people an opportunity to have something to touch and feel while they are enjoying a night out.
And a sense of community. And so you're telling people to bring a blanket.
Yeah.
They can hang out there, but you're also, Chef Onyx, you're going to be preparing some food. So give us an idea, like what is going to be.
So the menu is definitely inspired by your typical movie theater food, but it is the first of its kind, 100% vegan. And I am partnering with My V Spot. And we are building a amazing vegan menu. And also, every menu item has a historical reference to our city.
Excellent. And you were mentioning before we got on the air that one of those is the legendary curly fry.
Yes.
With its origins in Jacksonville.
Yes.
At Holly's Barbecue.
Yes. I am paying respect to Holly's Barbecue by introducing the curly fry and making sure that everyone knows that this is where the curly fry was created. And I want everyone to know. All the new people that moved here, they don't know. So it's time to educate.
Time to educate them. And so bring a blanket. Other things that people need to know?
Well, so the concept is designed about bringing your living room comforts to the outside. So you will have an opportunity to have a different era of a living room in each room. Each screen will have a different design, but it's all a living room style. So that comfort is, in my opinion, the best way to watch a movie with friends.
That's excellent. And popcorn's free?
Popcorn's free.
All right. The event is April 26th from 7 to 10 p.m. at the Main Street Pocket Park downtown. It's on Main between Duval and Monroe. Chef Onyx, good luck with it. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have feedback or suggestions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to listen Saturday at 4 when neurologist Dr. Joe Servin examines how small policy changes can lead to life-altering medical experiences. That's on What's Health Got to Do with It. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show's produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Coram. We say a fond farewell to our associate producer today, Jamie Valet, who will be sorely missed. Join us Monday when we explore the impact of everything from labor.
First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Welcome to Snub Week. A president ignores the courts on his deportations, and a top university tells him where to stick his list of academic demands. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A. Hi, I'm Todd Zwillick. So, how far will this administration go to defy a court order to bring home a man mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador? One judge is weighing contempt proceedings, another has found probable cause, and a third judge rips efforts by Trump's legal team to block the order. None of it has stopped misdirection coming from the White House about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Also on the roundup, Harvard pays a price for saying no, but the money rolls in. And buzz builds around AOC's role as a future party leader. We'll get into all of it after these headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. A day after European and American officials reported progress in a new effort to end the war in Ukraine, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has tamped down expectations. Rubio spoke as he left Paris. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports these were the highest-level U.S.-European talks on the conflict since February.
After making zero progress in its go-it-alone approach with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Trump administration seemed ready to try to work with the Europeans. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and White House envoys Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg sat down with German, British, and Ukrainian diplomats Thursday. The Europeans pushed the Americans to take a tougher line with Russia, but Rubio made it clear that President Trump might not even stick around.
We need to figure out here now within a matter of days whether this is doable, because if it's not, if we're so far apart that this is not going to happen, then I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done.
European leaders say they will never abandon Ukraine, as its survival is also key to European security. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
A federal appeals court has excoriated the Trump administration for its handling of an immigrant illegally deported to El Salvador. The U.S. Supreme Court has already told the Trump administration to facilitate his return, but so far, the administration has not complied. The Trump administration admits it was wrong in sending Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a Salvadoran prison. Federal appellate judge J. Harvey Wilkinson says, given that, why shouldn't the Trump administration make this situation right? NPR's Rylan Barton says the appeals court went further.
Judge Wilkinson said this is a very slippery slope. In his order, he imagined a future in which there would be no assurances that the executive branch would not deport American citizens or train its powers on political enemies. He said, we're in a moment where the executive and judicial branches are close to grinding irrevocably against one another in a conflict that promises to diminish both.
NPR's Rylan Barton reporting. U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador and met with Abrego Garcia last night. The stock market is closed today in observance of Good Friday. NPR's Scott Horsley has more.
All the major stock indexes are in the red for the week. Over the last 4 days, both the Dow and the Nasdaq fell about 2.6%. The S&P 500 index lost 1.5%. Asian stocks were mostly higher overnight. The new U.S. ambassador to Japan arrived in Tokyo and said he's optimistic that a trade deal between the two countries can be reached. For now, imports from Japan, like those from most other countries, face a 10% tax in the U.S. Gasoline prices continue to fall heading into the Easter weekend. AAA says the average price of regular gas is about $3.16 a gallon. That's about a nickel less than a week ago, but 8 cents higher than this time last month. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington. A federal grand jury in New York has indicted the man accused of killing United Healthcare's CEO Brian Thompson last December.